disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 10th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: Apple tested memory chips from China's CXMT across product lines as the U.S. company addresses a memory crunch during the artificial intelligence boom. Strong earnings reports from the U.S. largest companies are powering major indexes to new highs, are also easing some concerns that the recent rally is overly dependent on a handful of artificial intelligence stocks. Stocks are generating a smaller share of the return in dividend income, posing a challenge for those who lean on steady cash flows to cover daily expenses. Private credit is showing increasing signs of stress, despite comments to the contrary from some of the largest fund managers that are trying to put a year of turmoil behind them. Berkshire Hathaway, in the second quarter, repurchased its shares and bought more stocks than it sold for the first time in more than 3 years. Big U.S. consumer staple, food, and restaurant companies are enjoying substantial increases in overseas revenue, while domestic sales appear lackluster. Taylor Farms is removing certain products, including guacamoles and salsas, from grocery shelves over concerns of salmonella contamination, weeks after it recalled lettuce implicated in a cyclospora outbreak. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. Israel's Netanyahu rejected Trump's plan for a permanent peace in Gaza, a rare public break with the U.S. leader who weeks ago hailed a historic agreement to disarm Hamas. A top Iranian official laid out a series of tough demands for opening the Strait of Hormuz, and the UAE said Iran launched a missile attack on one of its ships, darkening the outlook for a deal to open the strategic waterway. Yemen's Houthis attacked a crucial port on the Red Sea, further escalating the conflict over strategic bodies of water in the Middle East. Will Scharf will become the new White House counsel in September, the president said, taking the position ahead of the midterm elections and potential congressional investigations. Joe Biden's cancer has spread to his bones and further, his son, Hunter Biden, told the BBC, offering a new window into the aging former president's condition. The Senate on Saturday narrowly confirmed Todd Blanche as Attorney General after a battle focused on his willingness to bend the agency to Trump's political and financial interest. Daniel Kinahan, the suspected head of one of the world's most feared crime syndicates, was extricated from Dubai to Ireland. died. Don Nelson, 86, Basketball Hall of Famer. The picture on today's front page shows armed soldiers in full military garb with their guns raised at the shoulder, marching through what appears to be a farmer's or vegetable market. And that caption reads, "On guard." Israeli soldiers patrolled a market in the old city of Nablus in the northern West Bank on Sunday, part of the force's broader military campaign targeting refugee camps in an effort to root out militant infrastructure. And that headline, Israel steps up its patrols in the West Bank. Articles from the front page follow. Netanyahu rejects next phase of Trump's Gaza peace plan. Israeli leader spurns proposal calling for Hamas to disarm withdrawal of troops by Anat Peled. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected President Trump's plan to establish permanent peace in Gaza, a rare public break with the U.S. leader who weeks ago hailed a historic agreement to disarm Hamas. The plan calls for the militant group to lay down arms in tandem with the gradual withdrawal of Israeli troops from the enclave, which the Israeli leader on Sunday said couldn't happen until Hamas was fully disarmed. Netanyahu's decision, spelled out in a government meeting and video statement, risks angering Trump, with whom he has had fractious relations behind the scenes for months. The collapse of the peace process in Gaza would rob Trump of what his administration has described as a major foreign policy achievement of his second term as the president is embroiled in the Iran war. Netanyahu, who has come under pressure from the Trump administration to agree to the deal to disarm Hamas, also faces uphill elections in the fall. His hard right coalition partners have vociferously objected to the terms of the agreement, as well as the decommissioning of Hamas's weapons in exchange for phased Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. The plan includes the entry of an international stabilization force into the enclave and a Palestinian technocratic committee to assume governance of Gaza. Israel rejects the 15-point document. The IDF will not carry out any withdrawal until Hamas is disarmed. And when I say the disarmament of Hamas, I mean heavy weapons, less heavy weapons, light weapons, all the weapons, Netanyahu said at the opening of an Israeli cabinet meeting using an abbreviation for the Israeli military. The document is the second phase of Trump's peace plan for Gaza that began in October 2025. The first consisted of the exchange of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners and an end to intensive hostilities in the enclave, while the second stage deals with thornier issues such as Hamas disarmament, Israeli withdrawal, and Gaza's governance. When Trump announced that a deal had been reached between Hamas and his Board of Peace, a body he created to oversee Gaza's post-war transition, he said Israel was very happy with it. Last week, Netanyahu said Israel had reservations. But Israel and Hamas are deeply distrustful of each other, and major disagreements about the details of the plan's implementation have since emerged, not least over the sequencing of disarmament and Israel's withdrawal. The Gaza plan arrives at a sensitive moment for Netanyahu, with polls showing he is likely to fail to secure a ruling majority in the coming general election. While the U.S. would like to see Israeli troops withdraw from what Israel calls buffer zones in Gaza and Lebanon, these moves are likely to be very unpopular with the Israeli Prime Minister's right-wing voter base, who sees Israel's presence there as important to their country's security. Iranians confound U.S. exit strategy. A deal appears unlikely without the U.S. unfreezing some of Iran's assets. By Alexander Ward, Washington. For weeks, President Trump had been laying the groundwork to declare victory in the Iran war should Tehran fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, even floating the idea privately to senior aides that he's willing to walk away without a nuclear deal, U.S. officials said. But that scaled-back objective became more difficult when Iran insisted Saturday on its highest price yet from the U.S. for permitting the free flow of traffic in the waterway, seeking billions of dollars in payments, the removal of American troops from the region, and an end of the naval blockade, among other things. This rapid chain of events suggests Trump's options for walking away from the conflict have again narrowed. Trump has repeatedly threatened, and then backed away from, a massive escalation of its bombing campaign. But the recent chaos in negotiations signal Tehran is prepared for a long and grinding conflict. Iran's recent hardline demands for reopening the strait make it increasingly difficult for the president to manufacture a face-saving off-ramp from the conflict, said Mona Jacobidian, director of the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington think tank. Gregory Brew, an Iran expert at the Eurasia Group consulting firm, said, "The Iranians fully believe Trump wants out and is focused on opening the strait, which is why they are playing hardball." Hanging over diplomatic talks since April has been the White House's ultimatum that Iran will never obtain a nuclear weapon. Trump sought to include nuclear talks as part of broader negotiations with Iran, but those have proved too difficult, leading the White House in recent weeks to focus more on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's ability to essentially choke off the waterway through sporadic missile and drone attacks has proved to be powerful leverage, stalling commercial traffic and roiling global oil markets. Trump has declared repeatedly in recent weeks that the Strait of Hormuz was already fully open, but each of those promises has proved premature. Now, with less than 3 months until the midterm elections and the price of gasoline still much higher than it was before the war started in late February, Trump, a Republican, has been looking for ways to tell the American public that the war is won. In recent days, Trump told reporters that he was prepared to launch the biggest military attack since World War II, but was talked down by U.S. allies. He insisted that a deal was imminent, although one hasn't materialized yet. On Friday, the president on social media suggested victory was at hand even without a nuclear agreement, linking to an article declaring Donald Trump won the Iran war. Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News that the U.S. would continue to pressure Iran to make long-term changes in its relationship with Washington. And if not, that's fine too. We're just going to keep on applying the pressure we can apply and getting as much oil and gas out of the Middle East so that Americans can enjoy lower gas and energy prices. We're in the middle of the game, Vance said. Tehran, which closed the waterway once the war began, has insisted that no American warships be allowed to traverse the waterway and has pushed to collect revenue from commercial vessels. Washington has said it won't accept Iranian restrictions or tolls, U.S. officials said. The prospects of a deal appeared to darken over the weekend when the United Arab Emirates said Iran launched a missile attack on one of its ships, and a top Iranian official laid out a series of tough demands for allowing traffic through. Mohammad Bagher Zogador, Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, said the U.S. would need to permanently end the war, lift its naval blockade, withdraw its forces, remove all sanctions, free Iran's frozen assets, pay war reparations, end threats and insults, and stop military action against Iran's militia allies around the region before Iran would open the strait, according to a report by state news agency IRNA. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Blowout earnings bolster record rally. Results have helped ease worries about AI spending, inflation, powering stocks. By Shadra Dinesh. Strong earnings reports from the U.S.'s largest companies are powering major indexes to new highs, easing some concerns that the recent rally is overly dependent on a handful of artificial intelligence stocks. Some concerns. Among the more than 440 S&P 500 companies reporting second quarter earnings so far, 86% have beaten analyst estimates, according to FactSet data. Companies are reporting earnings that are around 29% higher than those estimates, on track for a record earnings surprise in data going back to 2008. The S&P 500 is now headed for a seventh consecutive quarter of double-digit earnings growth. The run of upbeat reports from companies including Palantir Technologies, Caterpillar, and Disney last week fueled a climb that carried stock indexes to their best weekly gains since April. Investors still have plenty of volatility fueling worries, the on-again, off-again Iran war, and new questions about how the Federal Reserve will fight inflation. Many note that earnings growth remains heavily concentrated in energy and AI stocks, particularly skyrocketing profits at memory companies supplying the AI build-out. But earnings season is reassuring many that a strong core of corporate profitability underpins the market's gains. Companies in the S&P 500 have posted a roughly 50% jump in blended earnings growth, according to FactSet data, the most since the stimulus-fueled pandemic recovery in 2021. For energy companies, it has been more than 147% and around 117% and 92% for communication services and consumer discretionary sectors, respectively. For tech, it has been 70%. Kushner deal sparks protest. Suspected gangster, allegations of stolen land, hang over Albania resort plans by Elliot Brown and Vladimir Karaj. Zrnac, Albania. Residents of this tiny coastal village were shocked 2 years ago when Jared Kushner posted renderings of a planned Mediterranean resort on a slim peninsula sandwiched by the sea and a lagoon where flamingos flock. The images were of a spit of land where their parents and grandparents once raised potatoes. The villagers contend the property was stolen from them in the 2000s by Arthur Shehu, a suspected gangster who fled to Miami after a gunfight at his bar. So they wrote a letter to Kushner saying they were locked in nearly 2 decades of court disputes with Shehu, urging the developers not to proceed. The site, they wrote, is owned by the village and its residents. Instead, a Kushner-backed development group pressed ahead and paid Shehu over $120 million for the land earlier this year. 2 months later, Albanian prosecutors sought Shehu's arrest for allegedly playing a lead role in a sweeping international drug smuggling operation. Shehu laundered money through property, including the peninsula in Zrnac, that was stolen using techniques such as forged Ottoman-era land records, prosecutors said. The controversy is the latest black eye for Kushner's foreign real estate ambitions, one piece of the post-2020 business career he launched after the first Trump administration. While most of his investing has been out of his $6 billion private equity fund backed by Gulf wealth funds, Kushner also turned back to his real estate roots. He talked of getting in front of the investment curve by developing in the Balkans. He struck a no-bid deal with Serbia's government to develop state-owned land in central Belgrade, drawing local criticism that Serbia's government was trying to cozy up to Trump, a charge the government denied. The Serbia plans fell apart after weeks of protest and the indictment of a cabinet minister who pushed through project approvals. Kushner pulled out in December. The Albania project in Zrnac has drawn a larger backlash. A video showing the Kushner-backed group's private guards punching a local villager and dragging him across a beach sparked large daily protest in Tirana. The development group publicly disavowed the actions, attributing them to an unnamed security contractor. The demonstrations have continued for over 2 months, with protesters expanding their criticisms to endemic corruption and rampant development in a movement they called the Flamingo Revolution. Unlike in Serbia, money has already changed hands. The Kushner-backed development group paid well over $240 million for land to private landowners, including Shehu, according to a person familiar with the sales. This very long article goes over who owns the land that Kushner supposedly bought. Jury Duty Scam Cost a Family $25,000 by Joe Barrett, Tampa, Florida. The sheriff's deputy chatted breezily over the phone about his 3 young daughters as Kimberly Fudge drove through gritty streets and lush Florida byways on a grim errand, gathering thousands of dollars in bail to avoid arrest for missing jury duty. When Fudge, a 38-year-old manager in the finance department of a government contract, reached the drop-off point, she balked. It was a convenience store with abandoned gas pumps and a cryptocurrency machine inside. She was told to scan a QR code and feed the machine $4,000 in cash. Instead, she walked back to her car and began to voice doubts into her phone. Are you sure this is where I'm supposed to post the bail? The officer's friendly demeanor vanished. His voice rose. He reminded her he was tracking her location and that deputies were 2 blocks away, ready to bring her in. She went back inside and made the deposit. It was the first of many that day. A team of at least 5 scammers playing different roles with dead perfect Florida accents would keep her on the phone for nearly 10 hours and talk her into handling over $25,000. They had scared me, Fudge said. They could read her text and see her internet searches. They knew my social security number. They knew how much I had in my bank account. They had every single thing about me. Americans are awash in scams, phony UPS texts, AI-generated voices of loved ones in trouble, spoofed emails tricking city governments. People reported losing $3.5 billion to imposter scams in 2025, nearly triple 2020's level, the Federal Trade Commission said in a June report. The jury duty shakedown has surged in the Tampa area. Authorities say they won't call you to threaten arrest or demand money over missed jury duty. Leaving the front page, Apple tests Chinese memory chip. Maker of iPhones holds talks with China's CXMT amid memory shortage, by Raphael Wang and Rolf Winkler. Apple has been testing memory chips from China's CXMT across product lines, including iPhones and MacBooks, according to people familiar with the matter, as the U.S. company addresses a memory crunch during the artificial intelligence boom. Apple has held talks with CXMT about supplying components with the goal of using them in some devices sold in China, the people said. Apple hopes to win the White House's blessing to do business with the Chinese company. Apple is raising prices on its products globally, blaming the rising cost of memory chips because of high demand from AI companies. Getting access to Chinese supplies could help the iPhone maker ease its crunch. Insurer payouts for car crashes get less likely, by Jean Eaglesham and Jacqueline Jeffrey Walensky. Americans got into more than 6 million traffic accidents last year. Depending on the type of crash, the chance of getting a payout from your insurer has become increasingly remote. Auto insurers didn't pay out on 45% of auto liability and medical claims they resolved last year, according to a Wall Street Journal analysis of thousands of company regulatory filings. That rate might change slightly as more claims are resolved, but it is up from around 1 in 3 or 35% of such claims a decade ago. Americans are required to pay for car insurance as a condition of driving, yet often the insurance doesn't provide the financial backstop that car owners were expecting. The near flip of a coin chance of being left empty-handed on liability and medical claims, and the years-long trend toward relatively fewer payouts mirrors what is happening to homeowners and their insurance coverage, the Journal previously reported. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Rally has retirees rethinking dividends by Veronica Dager and Shraddha Dinesh. The stock market boom is pressuring an investment strategy popular with retirees. Stocks are spitting out a smaller share of their returns in dividend income, a challenge for those who lean on steady cash flows to cover daily expenses. The trailing 12-month dividend yield on the S&P 500 is now hovering around a generational low of just over 1% after trending downward for much of the past 2 decades. Such yields no longer outpace safe alternatives such as treasuries or certificates of deposit after taxes. That prompted 75-year-old retiree Stephen Yedlin to adjust his approach to dividends. Yedlin had been reinvesting his dividend payouts back into the market, but stopped doing so automatically. Instead, he is putting the extra cash flow into high-yield money market funds or giving it to his children. From the opinion pages, Viva la DSA Revolution by Andy Kessler. Socialism is the cool new way to get elected. The mantra is effective. Oh, we just want more affordable housing. And then simply whisper sweet nothings like free buses, cheap groceries, and frozen rent into the ears of young, naive, economically illiterate, free riding, over-degreed, underpaid, at least compared with their high self-regard voters who think surely the socialist central planners will appreciate my talents. It works. They get the votes. Better to listen to what they say and watch what they do. The Democratic Socialist of America states, complete victory will require building a new society from the ground up. This is their goal, no matter how much lipstick they put on their piggy ideology with slogans like less rent, more control, and workers deserve more. As history shows, socialism is no way to govern without carnage, bankruptcies, crashes, and inevitable unrest when the free buses stop running from lack of funds and upkeep. Perversely, those who ruined our education system are being rewarded so they can ruin the rest of the economy. How? The DSA website pines for a future without capitalism, in which you can work as much as you are able and no more than needed. It's almost as if Karl Marx came back and used ChatGPT to summarize his according to his needs nonsense. Democratic socialism is a worse oxymoron than original copy. Sure, it's the trendy new thing, but mostly fertilizer for the feeble-minded. New York Mayor Zoran Mandani seems infected with political cyclospora, exploding diatribes that leave you empty, tax the rich, afford the basic dignities of life. Zoe Mart would be great branding for New York City-run grocery stores, though they're doomed to fail. The mayor says they'll have 30% discounts on a core basket of goods. Did he ever take Econ 101? Price discovery is critical, else you get hoarding, shortages, and bare shelves. Or worse, La Libreta ration cards like in Cuba. This has all been tried before. You're a mayor, dude, Senator John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, said on Newsmax. Pick up trash. Fix some potholes. No fun in that. Viva la revolution. The movement's promises go downhill from there. Daria Liza Avila Chevalier is running for Congress, endorsed by Mr. Mandani. She wrote, in a since deleted tweet, "No more police at all, ever." Ever? She wrote to CNN that her tweets don't reflect who she is today. She's 32. The DSA Abolition Working Group's website says they plan to defund the police by rejecting any expansion to police budgets or scope of enforcement while cutting budgets annually towards zero. Yeah, that's ever. Bye-bye order. I lived in Manhattan under policing deficient Mayor David Dinkins. I foolishly bought a brand new Toyota 4Runner. It was stolen within 36 hours. My mistake. I then bought a used filing cabinet gray Honda Accord no one would ever steal. But it was busted into every weekend, likely by crackheads. No police in sight. Windows smashed. The key cylinders for the passenger door and trunk pried open. I had to use the trunk opener inside the glove compartment, which of course had been jimmied opened, and I kept closed with duct tape. I soon moved to Connecticut. Rudy Giuliani eventually cleaned up New York. Hollywood director Steven Spielberg moved to New York as of January 1st, likely to escape the potential billionaire's wealth tax in California. I wonder where he'll move next. And in a real-life disclosure day, California Representative Ro Khanna recently said, "The tax should not stop at billionaires. It must reach centimillionaires. The tax has to reach all fortunes $50 million and up. Send more U-Haul vans to California, please." Back to Mr. Mandani, who babbles about paying your fair share. He imposed a pied-à-terre tax for non-residents and then released a list of almost 1 million property owners. Brutal. Where would he get that idea? Remember Vladimir Lenin's 1918 Penza telegram? "We need to set an example," he wrote, followed by several bullet points. Publish their names was sandwiched between hang no fewer than 100 of the notorious kulaks, the rich and the bloodsuckers and take all their grain from them. Socialists have no originality. Destruction is infectious. DSA National Co-Chairman Megan Romer told Fox News' Shannon Breen her organization wants to abolish the Senate, get rid of the presidency and Supreme Court, defund the Pentagon, and nationalize most corporations. Wait, don't you have to burn the Reichstag first? Still, why don't voters believe her? This is beyond crackpots. This is cuckoo territory. Socialism is a gateway drug. Mr. Fetterman worries Democrats are drifting firmly into communism. Drifting? Let's ask the horse's mouth. A top DSA leader, David Jenkins, said the quiet part out loud. Our goal is liberation. Our goal is communism. The socialist candidate for Wisconsin mayor who wants to cancel Thanksgiving, Francesca Hung, raised money with influencer Hassan Piker, who likes to dress as Chairman Mayo. That's pretty black and white and red all over. Where is sanity? How to salvage science in Fauci's wake. A White House report argues that competition and freedom can bring about a new golden age, by Mike Gallagher. Anthony Fauci finally found a camera he didn't like. Under questioning from the Senate Homeland Security Committee on July 29th, the former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and one-time media darling invoked the Fifth Amendment to avoid discussing his actions during the COVID-19 pandemic. The last smug gasp of the disgraced administrator startled even prominent Democrats. Sports commentator Stephen A. Smith was so embarrassed by Dr. Fauci's display that he used his show's monologue to apologize to NBA guard Kyrie Irving for having pillared him for choosing not to take the COVID vaccine. Ashish Jha, President Biden's COVID response coordinator, declared after Dr. Fauci's disastrous Senate hearing that he believed the origin of the COVID outbreak was more likely to have been a lab leak. Dr. Fauci's refusal to answer any questions about the pandemic eerily mimics the tactics of his Communist Party collaborators in China, who have repeatedly blocked any international investigation into the origins of the outbreak. His silence denied transparency to millions of people who lost loved ones and livelihoods during the pandemic. In spite of his efforts to shirk accountability, Dr. Fauci has taught Americans plenty with the release of his diaries by Senator Rand Paul, Homeland Security Committee Chairman. Those diaries show a venal man who once claimed that to criticize him was to criticize science itself, obsessed with celebrity, his press coverage, and his own stature. He complains about Mr. Jha when it comes to things like the White House press conference and the Sunday shows. It is very clear that he is promoting himself above me. He gushes about how charming, natural, fun, and amazingly beautiful Julia Roberts was at a virtual award ceremony. And he makes clear that he viewed the worst pandemic in a century as a well-deserved star turn for himself. Worse, the diaries reveal Dr. Fauci's partisanship, basking in adulation at Democratic town halls while dripping with disdain for Republicans asking tough questions. As expected, several Republican senators got a bit snarky with me asking questions about the origin of COVID-19. These Fauci files provide rare insight into the behavior and mindset of someone at the top of our nation's scientific establishment. More important, they reveal a rot that goes deeper than any one official. The National Institutes of Health, which Dr. Fauci helped run, spent more than $40 billion on research in 2024, the largest source of federal research dollars outside the Pentagon. It employs and supports many talented scientists and dedicated public servants. To restore the faith in this institution, Republicans have a task: propose solutions that restore dynamism to American science. This effort couldn't come at a better time, as the ground is shifting under academia. AI models are driving Nobel Prize-winning work in chemistry and cracking advanced math problems. China has built a scientific industrial establishment that threatens to surpass our own. New technologies, from space flight and deep-sea mining to quantum computing, make inventing and deploying new innovations increasingly critical to the global balance of prosperity and power. For a reform agenda worth rallying around, look to science, a new golden age. A report recently released by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director Michael Kratsios, advocating an overhaul of America's scientific establishment. The report doubles as a condemnation of the biomedical research establishment. Despite massive increases in biomedical funding since the 1990s, the rate of significant breakthroughs appears to have slowed and drug approvals have flatlined. Researchers today often spend half their time on paperwork and administrative tasks, a burden worsened by expanding federal and university bureaucracies that further reduce funding available for actual science. The report catalogs the ways institutions and funding mechanisms aren't fit for 21st century research and development. It points out the rising age of NIH grant awardees, 51 in 2008, up from 39 in 1980, and well above the average age of Nobel Prize winners, 41 during the same period. It notes that some grantees don't receive funding until 20 months after the application deadline. It condemns how, in debates around COVID-19, scientific officials choose blind consensus over informed dissent. Stripe co-founder Patrick Collison and physicist Michael Nielsen have made similar points, positing in a 2018 Atlantic essay that discoveries have slowed because science has remained too focused on established fields where it's becoming ever harder to make progress. Mr. Collison, with economist Tyler Cohen, highlighted in 2019 how present funding mechanisms do not focus enough on research autonomy and risk-taking. Mr. Kratsios seeks to reinvigorate those mechanisms. He advocates new tools such as golden tickets that empower individual reviewers to champion proposals that failed to win consensus support and prizes, like the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency Challenge that kicked off progress in autonomous driving. He calls for increasing collaboration and talent flows among academia, national laboratories, and industry. And he highlights the need to deregulate how breakthroughs from new types of nuclear energy to promising medical treatments go from projects to products. Beijing builds nuclear plants at a clip unimaginable in the U.S. and increasingly accounts for more than half of new oncology clinical trials. Only deregulation can ensure that the future is both invented and built in the U.S. rather than discovered in America but made in China. The administration should put real dollars behind Dr. Cassios's proposals. Announce challenge prizes in critical technology areas, robotics, nuclear power, quantum computing, semiconductors, and batteries. Work with Congress, regulatory agencies, and industry to ensure that prize winners can rapidly gain approval for, scale, and commercialize their discoveries. Fund runners up too so they can spend the next decade pursuing research without pandering to government officials. Let the results speak for themselves. The scientific establishment may react negatively even to a modest version of this plan. That is because deregulation, new funding mechanisms, and empowering individual scientists would curb the authority of Dr. Fauci's fellow functionaries, these aging bureaucrats in government and universities who set themselves up as the gatekeepers of science. Remove the gatekeepers is the key. As Dr. Fauci made clear in his diaries and with his sullen refusal to answer questions, today's guardians of old paradigms serve their own interest rather than any national interest. Shaking up the institutions that empowered Dr. Fauci would serve the country well, even if it wouldn't get Mr. Kratsios invited to the swanky Washington galas that once showered Dr. Fauci with awards. America's military is dangerously exposed. The Iran war proves it, and the Chinese threat is greater. We need new thinking about defense. By Seth G. Jones. Iranian attacks against U.S. military bases in the Middle East, including recently in Jordan, highlight the growing threat from adversary missiles and drones. Yet the U.S. isn't sufficiently prepared to defend its overseas bases, critical infrastructure, and personnel. U.S. sites across the Pacific are particularly vulnerable to Chinese and North Korean attacks, as are U.S. locations in the Middle East. The choice before Congress and the Pentagon is clear. Spend the money now to protect these facilities or face a much more serious problem in the future. Since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, Iran has conducted more than 2,000 air, missile, and drone strikes across the Middle East, damaging at least 20 sites in 8 countries used by the U.S. military. Iran has so far caused as much as $13 billion to the U.S. alone in equipment losses and facility damage. In total, Iran has damaged or destroyed more than 42 U.S. military aircraft, several of which were parked on air bases. The recent Iranian strikes on Muwafaq Salter Air Base in Jordan killed 3 U.S. soldiers and damaged airfield hangars and other infrastructure. In Qatar, the U.S. Combined Air Operations Center has sustained severe damage. Iranian strikes wounded U.S. personnel and damaged aircraft in Saudi Arabia. In Bahrain, Iran hit the headquarters of U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, radar, satellite communication dishes, and warehouses. Iran also targeted U.S. aircraft hangars and satellite communication systems in Kuwait. In addition, Iran and its partner forces targeted the U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, as well as the U.S. consulate in Dubai, among others. U.S. infrastructure's vulnerability to these sorts of strikes shouldn't have been a surprise. Since the full-scale war in Ukraine began in February 2022, advancements in drone and missile warfare have pushed both Ukraine and Russia to take extensive steps to protect bases and critical infrastructure. Ukraine significantly increased its deployment of surface-to-air missile systems, counter-drone systems, electronic warfare, and sensors to detect, shoot down, or jam incoming projectiles. Ukraine has also built physical barriers to protect against Russian strikes, including anti-drone netting and layers of concrete. It has even dug underground facilities for critical infrastructure such as command and control headquarters and defense factories. The U.S. has been too slow to learn from the war in Ukraine and protect its bases and other infrastructure in the Middle East. The challenge in the Pacific is much greater. China presents a more serious threat than Iran, with a larger and more capable stockpile of drones and cruise, ballistic, and hypersonic missiles. U.S. military bases and other infrastructure across the Pacific, from Japan and the Philippines to Guam and South Korea, are highly vulnerable to Chinese and North Korean missiles and drones. The U.S. needs to get serious about protecting its critical infrastructure. The first urgent step is increasing active defenses, which include air defense systems that can identify, shoot down, or otherwise disrupt incoming missiles and drones. In addition, directed energy weapons such as high-energy lasers and high-power microwave systems can be useful against incoming drones. So can radio frequency jamming and electronic warfare systems. Congress should boost the Pentagon's facilities sustainment, restoration, and modernization funds to address these gaps, and the Pentagon should spend it quickly. The U.S. has already paid a huge price for being unprepared in a world where drones and missiles are ubiquitous. Will the U.S. military learn before the price escalates? The Chinese, Iranian, North Koreans, and Russians are waiting to see. This has been the August 10th reading of the Wall Street Journal by Corrine. Thank you for listening.